No, one is that, like, I keep saying this, that you need to do 80% of the work you don't want to do 20% of the work that you want to do. And I think that's something that I continue to drill down to every person. In our line of business, you work as much for people as you work for the brand you work for. And I think that it becomes severe in my responsibility to continuously make the canvas a lot bigger. And the problem that I'm coming back to is that because the quality of the brand manager on the other side on a consistent basis is deteriorating, the success of a brand is measured in, oh, I got featured on one of these places for topical posts. Oh, I got spoken about in this side of a content because I was able to just quickly get in, get out, hack, right? The whole Me Too phenomena of every brand trying to do what the other brand is trying to do, right? We're becoming a clone of a lot of brands on its own, right? Like if you pick up brands, you'll see a lot of brands in them, and distinct identities have become very, very difficult. So the craft is becoming, well, not as crafty as it used to be back in the day.
Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. If this is your first time here, we curate wisdom from India's best founders, operators, and investors. We cover various aspects of the 0 to 1 to N journey across different domains like fintech or healthcare and functions like product or marketing. You'll find all the answers here from folks who've been there and done that. On this episode, I speak with Pratik Gupta, who is a founding partner at Foxy Moron, which is now part of Zoo Media. Zoo Media is the largest independent digital agency network in India. Pratik was 19 when he started Foxy Moron along with his co-founders, and over the last 14 years or so, they've worked with some of the leading brands in India like Amazon, Netflix, Grid, and Unilever. In this conversation, I speak to Pratik about what it takes to run an agency business, this new direction of a collective that they're pioneering and how that will work out, and how digital advertising and marketing has changed over the years. This was a fun conversation with a lot of insights in here that you might find useful, so let's dive in. This episode of the Startup Operator Podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Hey Pratik, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you.
Pratik, as I mentioned, I've been super excited to have you on the podcast. I ran a creative digital agency some time back, and there were good things and bad things to it. But one thing I can't understand is how you've lasted 14, 15 years. And as I mentioned before recording as well, no white hair, touch wood, at least until now. So what keeps you in the game? What is the secret of your longevity?
I think we started off very early we started off at 19. We started off when most of the other people were just studying in college. And I think that, like, very early on, we started to do some good work and great work. And then, like, we became very, very relevant very quickly. But the one thing that always stuck with us is that you can always build an organization that is fly by night, comes in, solves the problem, goes away. But what is it that you got to do to ensure that it lasts beyond you? How do you build an organization such as like that? And more importantly, when we started to answer that question, we started to realize that every aspect of your organization requires reinvention. And today, like, times move very, very quickly, right? Like technology and the way in which different generations are even coming to the workforce pose different challenges and different opportunities to you. And I think the opportunities and challenges just keep making us want more. And we've set across a path that we've been very, very happy to be on, right? Like Suvir is my business partner. Suvir and I, we're really happy till the time we're challenged. And I think that there's no line of business which is more challenging than advertising. It is one of the most glamorous looking businesses from the outside, but is one of the most hardworking businesses on the inside. And to build something that sustains in the advertising space, that's scalable, that continues to attract great talent, that continues to work with the best brands out there, still remains something that we think we're conquering. And that's why we're still in the business. And I don't have gray hair because I'm still 34, but specks, small specks here and there, which good light can hide. It's happening, but not as fast as I would like for it to be.
Yeah, so advertising is racy, right? I mean, it's quite fast, and it keeps you on your toes. And some of the creative directors, or in fact, most of the creative directors I look at, I mean, they seem spent. They
Yeah.
seem hungover from all of the work that they've done, and they always seem to be moving ahead. I mean, they always seem to be getting to some place. But what I notice is, I think there is this sort of a zen-like calmness in you folks. I mean, you tend to enjoy the process, and perhaps that also explains some of that longevity, right?
100%.
Now, at 19, you wouldn't have had this grand vision of, hey, I mean, we're going to build this agency which is going to turn into an institution and a collective and so on, right? So, how did that sort of come into your mind? I mean, how did this whole idea evolve?
I mean, I was slated to go abroad and study. I had a full boat to go and study outside of the country. I chose not to go, and I had done IB in at Dhirubhai Ambani here in India. And I came back into the Indian education system, and really the education system didn't challenge me at all, right? Like, and then you go into, go and do an internship, you go and work somewhere, and the quality of that work and the quality of the internship was not something that I would have liked for it to be. And I'm the kind of boy who would always required something to keep him busy. And so we just decided that like a couple of things were coming our way, a little bit of work was coming our way. So we just decided to come together and start something. We had no grand vision, we had no grand plan, we had no business plan, we had nothing, right? We just had the intent of finishing the next 3 months, learning a lot more than we would have learned. And the only thing that Suri did correctly was that comes from a lawyer family, so he made us sign a partnership agreement, right? Like he just legitimized this idea, and I often refer to this moment, right? We would have happily done this for 3 months, gone back to our lives, gone back to studying, gone back to pursuing a very, very different path. But the fact that we signed this piece of paper really made us believe that it's our own. It really made us believe that we were responsible for something. And even though for the first year we had no business plan, we did odd jobs. We printed T-shirts, and we did hoardings, and we did a little bit of branding, and we did things that we had no idea that we could do also. We just had the time, the energy, and the intent to continuously fail, right? Like, hey, we didn't know things that people were asking of. Go back, work hard, figure it out, fail if you had to, come back, you know. And 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 that's when we start to realize that a lot of what we were doing was in the digital ecosystem, right? And then we just said, okay, this makes sense. We're naturally moving towards the digital ecosystem. Prepared a deck, took it to a lot of people. They said, I don't know what you're talking about, because digital had not even started. But when digital became a mandate, when digital became something that they had to go out and chase, they remembered us, right? So they called us, and some of the biggest companies in the country called us, saying, "Listen, you boys came, presented some 100-slide deck. Now, like my global headquarters are telling us to go digital. Come do something." And we were in so early, Roshan, and it was not so early to become irrelevant, but it was early enough for us to have made all the mistakes that we had to make, to experiment as much as we wanted to experiment, because really there was no right or wrong answer, right? We were the only few people who were providing an answer. So most people were happy just to get an answer. And suddenly, from nothing, we became a very relevant organization. We became a fairly big organization. And one of the moments that really switched for us is, we were doing work for some agencies, some mainline agencies, as well as most agency or digital agencies who started would be doing. And we had some direct clients too. And I think the guys at Facebook came over once because we were the only Indian agency to have won a Facebook award from Asia. And we didn't have the money to take a flight to Singapore and collect the award. So they came to our office, and they were going to give us the award. And they showed four brands from India that made it to the global case study list. And three out of four of those brands were ours, but we couldn't stake claim to it. And I think that day we understood that shit, we're probably onto something, right? Like we're probably doing something correctly, but we won't take on any more outsourced work. So we stopped working for agencies, let go of 40-50% of our top line, and basically just said, we're going to do this on our own. That's the first time a business plan came into being. That's the first time what are the services that we're going to offer came to being. That's the first time we actually started to legitimize our business. Till then, we were just working very, very hard. We were having a shit ton of fun doing what we were doing. It seemed like an extended college party because everybody was nice and young, and having loads of fun hanging out together. And yeah, we just enjoyed the journey, and then we started to legitimize the business. And I think this was about 2010 and 2011 early.
Pretty amazing, man. You talk about digital, I think 2010, 2011. I mean, these were early days of digital, right? But again, I think there is more to it than just good timing, because I think there were a bunch of these agencies that came up around that time, right? I mean, hey, even I ran a creative and digital firm at that time. So, how do you guys actually differentiate yourselves from the rest of the folks out there?
We were very fast to innovate, actually, Roshan. Like we were the guys who would be the first ones to do this and first ones to do that and first ones to do this and first ones to do that. We also had very young. We also had a very young workforce, right? Which a lot of the other agencies were struggling because digital came very naturally to us. It didn't come in as a service that I had to provide to a lot of people. That continued to remain my biggest advantage. Also, by the time most people woke up and understood that digital is real, we probably had 50 or 60 case studies under our belt. So when companies were out there looking for agencies who really could solve this at scale, right? They often started to come to us, which meant that a whole myriad of problems started to come to us, right? And the more different the problems were, the more we were innovating to actually solve those problems, right? We started a digital media buying team in 2011 or 2012, way before media buying actually had any sort of a structure. So we were able to crack the CPV sort of an algorithm as opposed to buying it on CPM. We were using Facebook apps way before Facebook apps became a real thing. We were already figuring out from a tech point of view how we can make multiple innovations inside of Facebook, the Facebook ecosystems. So we were always the agency who was having a lot of relevant conversations which were solving brand problems. And because we were the underdog in our heads, right? No advertising experience, no experience in terms of how to build agencies at scale. We kept doing things very differently. For the longest time, we did not have client servicing people. We said that the account management people are also my creative people, are also the people who will post, because if you don't know what is happening, if you don't have the texture
Yeah.
of what is happening, you're lost. And we
Nobody
did it
likes
because
uh, nobody likes client servicing folks anyway.
nobody like, but they're also very expensive, man. So we couldn't afford them at then back then. So we just made a team structure which had no client servicing people, right? So the people who were servicing the business were also the creative folk. They were also doing all of the work that was happening over there, and automatically it put us in a place where brands wanted to not only work with us, but they wanted to retain us. And we were retaining bigger businesses. We were doing bigger mandates, and really by the time we opened our eyes and realized what is happening, a lot of great work had already we had made tons of mistakes. In 2013 we had overhired, and how, right? That's when we started to realize staff cost. That's when we started to realize, like, what is the revenue per head count. We started to realize how to actually price correctly in the advertising space. So for us, I think we really enjoyed the process, and I continue to enjoy the process. It's a very hard business, and I say this to everyone, but I think the process is very fulfilling. It's if you get this right, when you speak to other entrepreneurs and you start to understand what kind of problems they're facing, you feel like, okay, at some scale you solved all of those problems, in some place or the other. So advertising is very holistic like that, and marketing is very holistic like that, and that's what has allowed us to survive for this long.
But when you do any kind of services work, right, as an agency, I mean, your destiny is in the hands of the customers that you choose and the work you take on, right? And you don't always have the sort of luxury of saying no to work that's coming your way, especially when you're early in the business, right? But that also kills you over a period of time, because it kills the spirit, that creative spirit in you that wants to do amazing work, right? That has ownership for every piece of stuff that you put out, every pixel that you put out. So, how do you balance both of these, and what are some principles you've realized to choose the right clients and do the right kind of work that keeps you inspired?
No, one is that, like, I keep saying this, that you need to do 80% of the work you don't want to do 20% of the work that you want to do. And I think that's something that I continue to drill down to every person. It is very easy to say that you want to build a organization that only does the most creative work possible, but you need to pay the bills. Creativity does not feed your stomach, right? And everybody needs to get paid. Everybody needs to run a proper business. Everybody wants to. Till those basics are not addressed, it becomes very difficult for you to do the best creative work of your life, right? And we keep reiterating this, saying that, listen, some of the work that comes our way, we understand is not the most creative work. We also understand the fact that it's not going to be work that we're able to put onto our portfolio. It's not going to be the sexiest work, but this is the same client who's going to give me the sexiest work. So you got to take a few to give a few, right? And you have to find that balance between business and creativity. In my experience, either agencies are overtly business focused or agencies are overtly creative focused, none of which work. You have to find a balance that works for you. Because at the end of the day, we're in a people business, and we're in a people business at scale, right? Like we need to be able to solve for creative at scale, which means that we have to attract the right talent. I may be a very creative person myself, or may not be a very creative person myself, but if my team is not creative, it's over. So you have to continue reiterating this same thought that you have to lose a lot to win a few. But when you win a few, you win big. And actually, on the client side, it's the opposite, Roshan. We say no to 2,000 businesses a year, and not from today, but from the beginning. For us, working with the right people, working with the right partners, working with the right clientele is very important. And if that is something that we're not able to fulfill, then whatever work you do, you will never be able to produce the best work of your career. So choosing the right partners to work with, and sometimes it's very tempting because of the kind of brand names that come to you, but really it's the people on the other side of the table, and it's also how much they respect you. We have a business development team here at Zoo and Foxy, whose 60% job is to just say no. Just say ki, nahi hoga. This is not something that I'm going to be able to do for you. Your expectation is out of whack. You're not paying enough money to be able to solve this problem. I don't think you're serious enough to be able to do this. And I think it's very important for us to be the gatekeepers for the kind of work that actually comes in, right? Because if you're not that gatekeeper, then rubbish comes in and rubbish goes out. And we've been able to have a fair balance of both of these things.
Right. But how do you scale creativity? How do you make sure that the 100th project that you take on is as good as the first or second that you did, or perhaps the 10th or 12th that you did, and then the 1,000th project is as good as the 100th that you did, and so on, right? So it is a very difficult problem to solve, and you can't really be hands-on every client and every project, right? So how do you make sure that clients still experience that quality? Because I've seen that even the top advertising firms, right? You name it. I mean, all of them seem to suffer greatly from this. It depends, what kind of budgets you have. It'll probably depend on who's actually doing the work on your brand, right? So how do you address that?
If you read enough self-help books, right, they tell you that that process and structure gives you more freedom than you think that it does, right? Like everybody looks at process and structure as a binding phenomena, but it's actually a freeing phenomena. And I keep saying this to everybody, right? Like I think that you need to, and we also fell into this trap of saying, how can you put structure to creativity? How can you put working hours to creativity? How can you make creative accountable? These are people who will think when they think, deliver when they deliver. But that's a whole bunch of eyewash, man. You need to put structure to even the process of creativity, right? You obviously need to hire the best talent, and you need to be a brand that the best talent wants to work for. But more importantly, you need to be able to put structure so that the creative person is able to do the best work of his or her career. And I think that our business is very well structured, right? Even right now, we're working on an operating system that allows us to put a lot more structure to the kind of work that we do. Because the more that we're able to think on behalf of the people who are working, the more we're able to anticipate their problems, the more we're able to systemically solve those problems, the more time I'm giving them to think about the problems that they have to solve. We put a lot of systems in and processes in check to allow for this kind of consistent creativity to be delivered. And we're making that pivot into becoming this whole marketing tech organization that uses tech at scale to address and solve a lot of your problems, right? Like sometimes people are spending 10 to 15 to 20% of their times just giving back drafts of stuff that they have pre-submitted. They're spending time just reiterating what they have told to one client because the other person was not on the call. They're not finding time on the calendar to actually be available for a brainstorm, and therefore putting the brainstorm off to another part. So we're systemically trying to solve these problems using technology at scale. And obviously, it really helps that you continue to retain and win very, very big businesses. So the best talent wants to continue to work for you. But how to retain the brands, how to retain the talent, and how to put system and process is the only way you can deliver at scale. And that's what we're in lots of places, the journey is still ongoing, and I think it will always remain ongoing. But a lots of places, we've been able to tackle that better than most people in our line of business.
Mhm. Yeah. I think a huge part of it is also the kind of talent that you hire and retain, right? I mean, attracting the best and the brightest to work on, some of these difficult problems. I've said this before. I think I knew the advertising agencies were dead. The conventional ones were dying and dead. The day when all of my coolest, most talented friends chose not to work with those folks and rather joined, digital or, new media folks as such, right? How do you keep the best and the brightest at Foxy and Zoo? Right, how do you make it aspirational for them? Because today, I mean, the world is an oyster for these folks, right? I mean, they're not limited by the kind of opportunities that perhaps, I mean, were there in 2008 or 2010. So yeah, I mean, how do you think about those things?
In our line of business, you work as much for people as you work for the brand you work for. And I think that it becomes severe in my responsibility to continuously make the canvas a lot bigger. I think a lot of advertising and creative shops stop being ambitious, right? They stop trying to add multiple facets to their business, right? We've always had a problem of plenty, and we've always had a problem of plenty because we've always been very, very excited by the new shiny toy that's out there, right? Like if it's AI technology, then what we're doing with that. If it's creative technology, then what we're doing with that. If it is, the Web3 ecosystem today and what we're doing with that. What happens is that it becomes Suvir and my job to make the canvas a lot larger on an ongoing basis, right? As soon as we make the canvas a lot larger, we have to grow, become better, become bigger, become better leaders, or put a lot more aspects to our into our leadership style, right? That propagates the people who are working with us to move in that direction as well. I think that in advertising more than in any other business, if you're still, you are usually losing a lot more time and energy, right? Like you have to keep moving forward. And when you're keeping on moving forward, you continue to attract the right kind of brands and you continue to retain the right kind of talent. Because the talent also wants to associate themselves with a place or with people who will continuously push them out of their comfort zone. It's very easy for a highly creative person to rest on his or her laurels and say, "Hey, I've done this one big campaign. This is one can. This is one two can. This one three can." And you're just like, I can happily just take that badge all over the world and survive for the next 25, 30 years. But if they find an environment that's consistently poking them, that's consistently telling them that they have to develop newer aspects of leadership, that more is expected of them, and these are the tools for them available to them to achieve it, right? I think people stick, but it's been a hard 2 or 3 years, Roshan. I'm not going to lie. I think this whole big tech boom, this whole unicorn boom, right? Like the only kinds of people that they were seeking in the market were digital folk, right? So it's been the hardest 3 years to retain talent because the amount of money that was thrown at these people was
Yeah,
just
absurd.
unlimited and absurd, right? Like it was beyond the point when these people came to chat with us. I was just like, hey, this is an FII meeting, right? There is nothing that I can do to tell you except for the fact that it's a beautiful bubble that will burst at some point in time. But once your living standards go up, it's very difficult to come down, right? So once you get used to the money, you will never be able to survive with lesser money. But that's not your market worth. And it was difficult because you were also locked down. You also, and it was strange that there were just places and pockets that had unlimited cash available to them for to hire. So the amount of talent that's coming into digital is fairly limited. The amount of good talent is even more limited, and great talent is just scarce. Like it just does not exist. So for us to retain, good talent and great talent becomes that much more important. But we have to understand the sanctity of the organization. We have to understand the sanctity of the overall people who are working with us before we jump to conclusions of just trying to throw blind money at people. So money is not the only answer, right? You need a lot more than just good compensation or benefits. And you're seeing this in big tech today, right? Like you may have, all the meals of the world and you may have all the business class seats of the world. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough cash burning, you're still going to lose a job. So we're trying to build an organization that has a very good sense of balance so that we're able to continue to retain this talent and therefore continue to retain the big brands that we work for.
This episode of the Startup Operator podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Now that we're all back at the office meeting colleagues and clients, it's time to ditch those PJs and look sharp with Park Avenue's range of 100% cotton, wrinkle free shirts. They're super easy to maintain and keep you looking fresh through the day. So, my fellow startup operators, visit the Park Avenue store or myraymond.com and check out the new wrinkle free shirt collection. Yeah, I think 2021 was such a crazy time, right? I mean, I remember talking to more than a few candidates and, saying that, hey, you're just pricing yourself out of the market. I mean, you just do the math. I mean, it's not going to work out, right? I mean, if you're going to switch jobs every 2 years, you're not going to get it at this sort of a hike, right? How are you going to sustain yourself? But I think there's a bit of a correction now. I think it's a lot more tempered right now. I want to dig deeper on something that you mentioned, right? I mean, which is like always thinking about where next, what next, right? And there's this classic innovators dilemma, right? I mean, you're doing fine, just fine doing what you're doing. What is the kind of incentive to just look beyond what you're doing and actively invest in that? So let's say, I mean, if you are considering, maybe building a video production agency or maybe doing something on the content side of things, what was the call that you took internally that, hey, I'm going to put X amount of money here and I'm going to see how this pans out and so on? So can you walk us through some of that decision making process?
So it was, I mean, I think the decision became very, very apparent, Roshan. Like one is that Foxy Moron became a full service 360-degree agency that everybody was aspiring to become at some point. Do you do SEO? Yes. Do you do video? Yes. Do you do influencer? Yes. Do you do social? Yes. Do you do technology? Yes. But you know this because you did start your own creative shop, is that we run a cash flow business. The amount of free cash available is equal to the amount of investments that you're going to be making in the future growth. So did I have a video team? Yes, I had a video team. I had 4 5 crore rupees of video business coming in, and I would spend 1 2 crore rupees on the video team to to churn out that video content. Right? Simple mathematics. But was that the best video team in the market? The answer to that question was no. It was a sustainable video team. It was a video team that would do good work. Will that video team do great work? The answer to the question was no. And we had one pitch that we lost to Netflix because we didn't have the production chops to pull off the creativity that they were very impressed with. So they said, I get it. I get the fact that you are very, very creative, but hey, you don't have the production chops to pull it off. And after you get over the initial disappointment of what the hell, why did this happen? You look deep inside and you're like, yeah, 100%. I was working from a growing my business in a cash flow point of view versus I need to have an investment mindset for me to be best in class. And as this digital realm starts to expand, right, we will need best in class agencies who will be able to solve the questions that clients are asking. I can't be a middle player. If I'm a middle player, I'm always begging for work and begging for talent. If I'm a top tier agency, I'm doing great work and retaining great talent. The mindset had to move from just a delivery mindset to an investment mindset. And I hired better people. We were able to reposition people better internally and cut to 2019 or 2018 or 19 mid. We basically won back the Netflix business. And we won back that Netflix business on the back of great production and great production quality. So clients are seeking the best in the market in different places. Right? We are no longer a generation of people who are happy with just the average. We want the best in every place. And the more the client teams were becoming smaller on the marketing side, the more they wanted to work with the best people out there. So for me to start the best video production agency out there made a lot of sense because that video production agency was then available to all my clients inside of Foxy. That video production agency was also building its own clients, and those clients now will be available to all the other agencies inside of my network. Right? So initially it was just about building the best in class for multiple verticals. But what we start to realize is that this also becomes a business development funnel, which funnels the rest of the agencies inside of the network. And being best in class means that if as a full service agency, Foxy Moron would do X, being two different agencies, we would usually do X into two. And the economics start to make sense of it. The output and the outcomes that are able to give to the client start to make sense of it. And you start to realize that each of these agencies require a very different cultural fabric, require a very different expertise fabric, which a full service agency cannot provide you.
Right. But again, this is easier said than done, right? I mean, it seems super complicated if you ask me. I mean, you have 11 entities. How do you even structure, like, how do all of these entities work together? Because what you said in terms of business development, cross pollination, one client can become a client of another entity and so on sounds good. But then how do you make sure that all of these different entities are aligned and running in roughly the same direction?
So one is that like I think Suvir and my job has become stakeholder management, right? All of the people who are running these agencies become the stakeholders that we continuously keep interacting with. They become the people whose job it is for us to keep them aligned at the same place at the same time in the same way, right? Second is that systems and processes. What are the reporting formats? What are we chasing? What are the targets? Why are we chasing those targets? What are the clients? And most importantly, we have centralized and decentralized a lot of functions. Business development is centralized, HR is centralized, finance is centralized. So what tends to happen in this direction is that a lot of the control that corporate needs to have, control that corporate has, right? Versus all of their functions are decentralized to themselves. So each of their P&Ls will have brands from the other agencies as a part of their target list. We've also set rules of engagements internally. Whose client is it? How will that client be serviced? Is there a referral fee that you're going to be getting? What is that referral fee going to be? We're not telling them to create their own business models. We're creating those structures for themselves. Right? Put systems, put processes, the lesser the friction that you're creating inside of your own system, right? We're definitely seeing a massive uptake in brands who are using at least 4 to 5 of our agencies because they don't have to go out there and scout for best in class agencies, yet use one person or two people to continue to get access to those agencies. So it saves them bandwidth, yet gets them best in class, and therefore they're happiest to spend more time and money with us. And if the value of that client is increasing, I have no problem in investing in keeping those agencies best in class. Yes, it is complex, and we spent 4 years of our life trying to better this process as we go along. And I think we're at a great stage today where everybody knows what they need to do and how they need to do it. So, yeah, just systems, processes, controls, measures, centralization, decentralization, just clarity, I think. I think most people don't give clarity or don't spend time giving clarity. And those are some things that we take very, very seriously.
If I were to ask you, right, why do you think the conventional advertising guys lost out? Because I think over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, they've just been massive losers, right, for all of the new work that's come in. What do you think they did wrong?
It's very difficult to break out of something that really has worked for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the trap that they need to undo. So, say for example, their structure is very simple: media agency, creative agency, PR agency, right? And their entire structure is built around that. Today, those structures require lots more specializations than just that. They require the ability to have very different kind of talent coming in there. The problem is that the gap between the talent who's a lot younger and them was way too much. And a lot of the people just did not want to reinvent the cycle. So the cycle reinvented itself. I mean, they're very relevant. I'll be lying if I said they're not relevant. They're very relevant, but they're becoming very irrelevant very quickly, right? They're all moving towards digital. They're all moving towards building content at scale, but their skill sets are not geared to answer those questions, right? They're the same people who will take 1.5, 2 months to plan a campaign. And there is a shit ton of merit in doing that. There's a lot of merit in doing that, Roshan. Like, I mean, sometimes you look at their deck, sometimes you look at their thinking. The difference between the stuff that we present and the difference between the stuff that they present is that there is depth. They have gone over this once, they've gone over this 5 times, right? They've looked at every word, they've looked at every comma, they've looked at everything absolutely correctly, and there is a lot of value in that art. But really, the consumer of today doesn't have the kind of time to value the art that they're actually presenting. So who are we catering to, right? Like you have a Facebooks of the world today talking about a 3 second economy of attention. You have everybody who's very happy with content that's created on the phone. Branded content does not perform as well as non-branded content does. One logo and the performance drops by like 5x, 10x. In such a world where what they are saying has lots of value and weight, right? Build a brand, build a brand, build a brand, build a brand, and build a brand with that depth and with that knowledge and with that focus. There's lots of value in that. But the outputs that we need to give are a lot faster, right? Therefore, the flexibilities are a lot more. And sometimes it annoys me as well, right? Because sometimes, we keep talking about the craft and honing the craft and, like going so deep into the craft. And really, it's for a post that goes out there, which becomes irrelevant the next morning. So it's a constant battle, and I see why they've not been able to come out of the trap. But it is how the cookie has crumbled, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the failure is in not being iterative, right? I mean, I think, in today's times, and I can talk because I'm at the other side of the table as a marketing person, the context changes so quickly, done is better than perfect 9 times out of 10. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that, switching context hasn't really happened for the larger folks, right? Yeah, so, just on the thought of, customer expectations and so on, right? I mean, you have seen 14 years of, customers coming to you with various sorts of problem statements and so on, right? How has that fundamental marketing or advertising problem statement changed over the years?
The actual problem is that the fundamentals have remained the same, right? It's for me, and I keep saying this in every forum, is the quality of the brand manager on the other side that has deteriorated massive. And I miss the old guard of brand managers, right? Like they were instrumental in us being the kind of agency that we are, right? Like we were zero advertising experience, right? Like I speak very fondly of the people at L'Oreal who we worked with. They took us in like we're their own. They taught us marketing. They taught us the fundamentals. They taught us that, listen, while you're doing what you're doing, you need to understand this. You need to see this. You need to understand this model. You need to understand this value. That fabric is missing today in advertising, and I miss it very, very dearly. Right? Like I sometimes love hanging out with the people who have been in advertising and who have been in marketing or have been on the brand side for a really, really long time. I love the depth of knowledge that they have. I love the depth with which they approach the brand. And the problem that I'm coming back to is that because the quality of the brand manager on the other side on a consistent basis is deteriorating, the success of a brand is measured in, oh, I got featured on one of these places for topical posts. Oh, I got spoken about in this side of a content because I was able to just quickly get in, get out, hack, right? The whole Me Too phenomena of every brand trying to do what the other brand is trying to do, right? We're becoming a clone of a lot of brands on its own, right? Like if you pick up brands, you'll see a lot of brands in them, and distinct identities have become very, very difficult. So the craft is becoming, well, not as crafty as it used to be back in the day. And I sometimes miss it, right? And the older advertising folk miss it every day, right? They like, you're talking about superfluous things, you're talking about content at scale, you're giving approvals for 10 pieces of content. It used to take us 1 month to approve one artwork for an advertisement. And therefore, you're seeing very few brands cut the clutter and cut the clutter without ridiculous amounts of money being thrown at it. I was reading a very interesting article. Marketing is the balance for these new age companies to either make it or not. If you have a product that sells at 100 rupees and your marketing budget is 20 rupees, your product will succeed and your business will succeed. But if your product is selling at 100 rupees and your marketing spend is 80 rupees, that's the end of your product. And we're seeing this today, right? We're seeing that very few brands have been able to build themselves as brands who stand for something, who believe in something, who continue to make an impact in the last 10 or 12 years, right? Lots of brands have come, lots of brands have gone. But the brands that have been built over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they still have a voice, they still have a tone, they still have a reason to exist, they still have a way of communication. And I think that's a shift that we're seeing, which is little harmful to the industry at large.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people pay an inordinate amount of attention to the lowest level of abstraction, right? I mean, that could be some kind of a post or some weird thing that people perhaps forget in a day or two, right? And not really sort of revisit the soul of the brand, right? I mean, try to communicate that ethos through campaigns, right? Yeah, I mean, I see that as well. You guys try to globalize your services as well, right? I mean, could you talk about that? I mean, are you guys selling in Middle East, Southeast Asia, the US, etc.? How has that journey been?
We've just come back from the US, Roshan. We come back about 3 weeks ago, and we signed in with our first network of independent agencies over there called Dawn Marketing. So we've been attempting to start in the US for over 18 months now, and we realized that just like anything else, we have to go get in there. We're doing with the right amount of homework. So we've been speaking to a few people, and we have these regular 6:30 p.m. Friday chats that we've been having for over 15, 16 months now, slowly and steadily chipping away at what we think needs to be our global strategy. And I think we finally given face to the strategy with us entering a marketing network called Dawn Marketing. It is the best independent agencies coming together in the US. We are entering the US on two fronts. One is that we're entering with expertise around Web3. expertise around marketing tech and data automation for a lot of the brands over there because we have the ability to solve those problems at scale for lots of brands. We will acquire for culture, we will acquire for relevance, we will acquire for context because we may have watched all of the American shows that have ever released, but doesn't make us American. So we're going to acquire for context, we're going to acquire for, culture for sure. But more importantly, we're also working with these agencies in today's time more than ever, where we have an agency at scale of 700 people. We have the agency who caters to the same cadre of clients that they do, and we're going to be helping them offshore a lot of their work back here in India. So we're going to offshore work across media buying, data analytics, content production, technology services, and all of our agencies that we have either built, acquired, or done joint ventures with here in India will now become sustainable offshore offices for these agencies who can get the same quality of service at scale from somebody like us. So we have entered the US market and very, very successfully. So Touchwood, it's been one of the great steep learning curves. We almost started a Middle East operation right before the pandemic. But my CA thankfully told me that we'll start it in April because otherwise there's too much of paperwork to do it in Feb. So we got saved because the pandemic hit in March. And we have revisited that conversation and we should have we already have work from the Middle East, but we'll have a full-fledged office and operation in the Middle East by the first quarter of next year. So yeah, we are definitely globalizing our ambitions because I think the structure that we have put together works. It works, and also I think more importantly, our time as Indians has come. We've seen a massive shift in just the amount of respect or just the amount of space you get on an equal table today if you're sitting across and you're Indian. I believe that we're a great representation of this modern India. We want to make modern India go to the world, and we want the world to understand, accept, and appreciate what Indians can bring to the table. And we'd like to be those torchbearers. We'd like to be people representing our country on a global scale. And yeah, I mean, we're on the journey, man. It's very, very scary. It continues to wake me up at night sometimes just because the time zones are so different. But yeah, it's a fun journey that we have embarked, and it's doing fairly very, very well as of where we're sitting today.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, I think if you look back over 40 years, I think we learned to build all of this back-end stuff, whatever it was, supply chain software, accounting, account management, etc., whatever it is. Over the last 10 or 15 years, I think we've learned to productize these things, right? Get on the front end of some of this technology. I mean, you're seeing with this whole startup and SaaS ecosystem and so on. And I think what's left is to be able to sell and market, right? And I think that's the eventual curve, right? I mean, that's where we need to end up owning brands, right?
Yeah,
And build
yeah.
those large, Ogilvies of the world, maybe sitting out of India, I would say, right?
And that's the ambition, yeah. Like it's a very hard way to do it, but I think lots of newer doors are open, right? Like and I just like to spend a little bit of time over there. It's no longer just the big four in advertising or the big six in advertising. Today, venture capital is very interested in organizations like us. Today, a consulting firm like an Accenture, KPMG, they're very interested in us. We potentially have an exit possibility. I mean, not an exit, but like we have a listing possibility in stock exchanges today, right? So a business that is structured like ours, right, has lots of eventualities versus what we did even 15 years ago, right, which makes our ability to take that risk or to think more agile on our feet a lot more available, right? Like 15 years ago, the only way to have made it in advertising is to sell to one of the big six. So that's also opened up. The markets have opened up. Our ability to think in that direction has opened up. And we're excited for whatever possible eventualities we may see that we may unlock right before I grow that gray hair that you were referring to right at the beginning of this podcast.
So tell me something, with the kind of work that you do and what you've built, right? I mean, obviously you would have had acquisition offers, right? I mean, we spoke about some of your contemporaries being acquired by
Yeah.
the larger folks. What made you resist them?
We didn't resist them, Roshan. We had signed a term sheet with Group M and with WPP. We were operating out of their office between 2014 and 2018. We were four people who started this organization, and eventually only two people lasted. So we had 4 years of internal turmoil, if I may say so, which kept that whole deal at bay for a very long time. And eventually, we just wanted to get the control back and we said no to WPP and Group M. Otherwise, this would have been a very, very different journey that we would have been talking about. And it's got lots of merits here. Like, I have lots of respect for these guys who built such large organizations at scale and with the kind of structure that they built it. I have learned a ton basically just working from within their systems and understanding who they are. The deal did not go through, and it did not go through because of us more than because of them. And it did not go through because we had lots of issues with partners exiting and staying back. And it was just a lot of filth that I don't blame them for not wanting to be a part of. And eventually we wrote the network vision and we wrote what we wanted to achieve even inside of WPP. And then when we eventually said no to them because the issue was not getting resolved, we just said we're going to pursue this ourselves. So it was a by chance. Yeah, we were 25, 26, offered copious amounts of money to join a larger network. We were all going to go ahead and do it, but I think it was not destined to be. And while I'm very grateful to that journey, and I'm very very thankful to the things that I learned inside of Group M and some great people over there. Yeah, I just think life had a different path for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange kind of catharsis, right? I mean, when you come out of this whole thing a lot stronger. Pratik, final couple of questions. From everything that you've learned running this agency for as long as you have done, if someone were to say that, I'm going to start this agency business, right? What are some 3 or 4 principles that you would offer to them?
Oh wow, what are three or four principles I would offer them? This is an endurance-based business. You really have to have the ability to last as long as a marathon runner does. Or I would say even like go as far as thinking of an Ironman. It takes away consistent amounts of energy. It requires you to consistently recalibrate. Reinvention has to become your middle name. You need to have the ability to retain people, clients, at the same time scale. It's a very, very difficult business to run, but when you're able to successfully run a business with so many complexities, when you look back, you start to understand the value that this kind of business has added to you as a person, right? Like, I don't recognize myself every couple of years, and just the amount of value that this adds to you. So, if you're in it for the destination, you will struggle, but if you start to enjoy the journey, you'll really have a lot of fun. And your ability to endure will teach you a lot more and get you a lot further than any other skill set that you may require. And it's like one of my favorite quotes that exist is, it's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, because that's how winning is done. So I don't think that you can win just by landing punches, right? You have to win because you tire the other person out, and you just keep moving forward, and that has to become your biggest strength. That's all you need in our line of business.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of thing, right? I mean, you go from people frustrating you to people giving you a lot of joy, and then you kind of swing between both, and you come out of it all the more wiser, I suppose, right? With a very good understanding of how humans work. I mean, what drives them. Yeah. So before we end the podcast, any books or other podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, I read books. I read books for sure. I think there are lots of. I think the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, I think, is a stunner of a book. It really puts lots of things in very black and white perspective, right? Like, I like the fact that he doesn't care about what he says, right? Like, he says it like he says it. There is a book on negotiation that I read, which I recommend everybody does. It's called Getting More by Stuart Diamond. He's a professor who teaches negotiation, and some of the things that he tells you to do, and he says every conversation is a negotiation. I think is a stunning book to read, and it's also a stunning mindset to get into, because every conversation that you're having in our line of work with people or with clients eventually is a negotiation of either delivering more or getting more or doing more, or not delivering enough. So I think it's a great book to read. The book by the Netflix founder, which is No Rules Rules, talks about a very mature organization who starts to empower themselves because they have been able to meet the basic criteria of having the most amazing sports team, as he describes it. I think these three books are a fun, very different kinds of books to read, fun ones. So hopefully most of the readers will enjoy. I mean, most of the listeners will enjoy reading this book.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much again for making the time for this. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I will perhaps be reflecting on all of the insights that you shared for a while to come, I would say.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Roshan. Thank you so much for having me. I think it was fun. It's sometimes fun to look back and say, shit, this much has happened. So I'm glad we were able to we were able to have this chat.
Yeah, all the best for everything you have coming up.
Thanks, Roshan. Thank you so much.
In this segment of the Park Avenue PowerPoints, we review some of the highlights of the conversation. Number one, in the services business, you may not always do the kind of work that you like, but understand that it's necessary to pay the bills. As Pratik says, do 80% of the work you don't want to do about 20% of the work you really, really want to do. Finding that right balance between creativity and business is imperative. About retaining talent, Pratik says good talent wants to associate itself with a place or people who will push them out of their comfort zones. So, as you grow, you need to be able to add more aspects to yourself as a leader and get better. Number three, on facing the classic innovators dilemma about adding new products, services, and businesses versus building on the one that's already making profits, Pratik says the mindset has to shift from a delivery point of view to one of investment. Number four, as far as conventional advertising agencies and what they did wrong, Pratik feels the simple organization structures that they have are not enough. They require a lot more specialization across functions, and legacy agencies create art, but today's consumers want something that is fast and topical. And finally, for those who want to venture out and start an agency or a services business, Pratik says it's an endurance game. If you're in it for the destination, you'll struggle. But if you enjoy the journey, you'll have a lot of fun. So there you have it, folks. I hope this episode was useful and interesting. We'll see you on another episode of the Startup Operator podcast with another amazing guest.